Hi everybody. We're going to be looking a little bit at our first lab today. And the idea behind this lab is to help you all understand a little bit about geometry in Gothic cathedrals. And I think this should make it a little bit easier on you all if you're new to 3D modeling, to just sort of follow this through step by step. And I would recommend probably watching it through once before you really start working, and just so you get an idea of where it's going. Otherwise, you can just hit pause as you go. So let's start. What you're looking at right here is roughly where we're going to get by the end of this tutorial, and I will allow you all to sort of finish the rest of it creatively on your own. So what I want to do first is show you all how Fusion 360 works. I'm going to go and back to my original course projects page. And you can see we have one object here, one design is what we're going to call it, which is called Amiens Lab 1 Practice. I have that inside of a folder. It works pretty similarly to a lot of software, but everything is in the cloud. So what you do is the hierarchy in Fusion 360 is you create you have a team. You can invite people onto your team, and then the next level below that is a project. So you can see that I have all my tutorials into one project here. Inside of a project, you can have folders, and inside of folders, you can have designs. You don't necessarily have to have folders. You can put designs directly into the project, but I like to have folders just to keep it a little bit more organized. So I'll go into Lab 1, and let's just start a new design. So this is what it's going to look like when you first open the software. You all should have your account right here. It's going to be saving things automatically. Right now it's just called untitled, so until I actually give it a name, it's not going to save anything. So what I'm going to do is, just even before I get started, I'm going to hit save, and I'm going to call this I would suggest that you all use your last name, so I'll just do it this way. Triplet tutorial practice lab 1. And I'll just quickly hit save. Okay, so now it's going to be automatically saving periodically. If I decide I'm going to make a very big change, I can actually hit save again and save another version of it. And you can then describe the big change that you made. But otherwise, it's just going to keep saving it. So let's start with inserting something for us to trace, because we're going to have some guidelines. So let's go right up here to Insert, and I'm going to click on Insert for my computer. And I have in OneDrive, you all will have this too. You can download it directly to your downloads folder if you have it somewhere else. You know, this is going to be the same Windows or Mac. It doesn't really matter. But this already knows that I'm looking for this image of Amiens, which is we're going to get to near the end of the course. But this is a really good example, this particular building, for this, because the geometry is actually quite simple. So the first thing it's asking you to do is select a face on which to put your canvas. Okay, so we hit Insert Canvas, and then it says Face. And what we want to do is put it on the bottom face. So if we see this view cube at the top right-hand corner, we can hit top like this, and that will at least remind us what direction everything is facing. Right now you're seeing that top is spelled sort of sideways. So what I want to do is just quickly turn this over so that the top is facing the right way. That just keeps me oriented. It's just an easy thing to do. So I'm going to select this face right here, and you can see it sort of dropped. If I zoom way in, it dropped the plan in there, but it's not oriented correctly. I'm going to rotate this 180 degrees, and then I can grab this little square right here, and I'm just going to, this is just habit for me to just pull it out a little bit. I'm going to put it roughly on the Z axis here, so we're looking at the X in red and the Z in blue, so I'm going to drop it just so it sort of bisects barely right there. I'm going to have to come back to this in a second anyway, which I'll explain. So I'll just hit OK for now. That's fine. The next stage is to open up our canvases. Okay, so this area right here is called the browser. This is going to have all of your objects, such as sketches, which are 2D objects, and 3D objects are going to be called bodies. But before we get to that, let's scale this. So what we want to do is right-click on this canvas that says Amiens Plan, and I'm going to go down to Calibrate. And this is a little tricky. I'm going to point my mouse over to where I want to go, and then use the mouse wheel forward to just sort of push it in a bit. So I'm going to zoom right in there to that 0. It's going to take me a little while. I'm not really sure why it's taking quite so long. And I'm going to put my first left click right at the 0 and my second left click right there. Okay, and what it says right now that the scale is 0.003 meters. Okay, the reason it says meters is because my document settings, you can double check that it is already set to meters. What I want to do is, without touching anything, I don't really need to do anything here, I'm just going to type 20 meters, just 20, and hit enter. So now you're going to see that everything got really large and just white all of a sudden, and that's because it's just scaled this object really, really big. So now I'm going to zoom out. And you can see over here on the right, this is 10 meters here, so we're counting down. The grid settings at the moment, if I go down to grid settings right down here, it's set for fixed. So as I zoom in, those squares get bigger. If I hit adaptive, it's going to keep changing the size of those grid marks. Okay, so what I want to do is just keep it fixed for the moment. There's a couple of other things. You might notice right here as you zoom in, and I think it's easier when it's fixed, that this is not, the image itself is not perfectly square. It's sort of rotated a little bit, and that is really, really common. So I think it's useful for you all to sort of know that when you scan these plans, they're not going to be perfect. So you're probably going to need to do some tweaking. So let's do that. I'm going to hit OK on that. Let's go and right click on this and say edit canvas. And the first thing I want to do is I want to just get a general idea of where the center is. So I'm going to grab this and I'm going to try to put the crossing, the center of the crossing right there. And then what I realize is that it's sort of tilted a little bit clockwise. So I'm going to sort of bump this over, and it says 3 degrees. Now that's way too much. I'm going to just guess at 1 degree and then zoom down. That seems like it's too much. So why don't we do something like 0.6? And that's a little bit better. And the only way we really can test this, and it's never going to be perfect, is to just sort of drop this in here and see if this bisecting line, this longitudinal axis, hits the center of these vaults here that are crossing, and they generally do. So that, I think that's okay. That's not a bad place to leave that. Okay, so we're in a pretty good spot here. This doesn't look too bad. Yeah, I think that'll do. So I'll just hit OK. Okay, so now we have a scale drawing that is roughly kind of getting bisected by this line. So the first thing we want to do is give ourselves some guides. So you can see up here at the top there's a few different buttons. Once you decide to go into the sketch mode, you're going to see that a lot of these buttons at the top are going to change, which is fine. It's just going to simplify things for you. So I'm going to close this to give myself a little more space. So let's create a sketch. Now the first thing they're asking is, because Fusion 360 is a 3D CAD software, they're asking you which plane do you want to be drawing on. Since I'm looking at the top, it seems quite obvious that this is the plane that I want to select. But if you're looking at it maybe something like this, it might be a little confusing. So you want to look at this to make sure you know where you're facing. And I'm going to just select this bottom face. So now you'll see this dynamic, we call it ribbon at the top, it's all changed, and I have this may not look exactly like yours. I've saved some of my most frequent shapes that I use up here at the top. I can also go down. I'm going to really quickly do this. I'm going to go and I use the mirror tool quite a lot, so I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to say pin to shortcuts, and it should be pinned to the toolbar. Oh yeah, there it is already anyway, so that's okay. So that's on the toolbar, but I'm just going to start with a line. So I'm going to click on line, and right down here down the middle, it doesn't matter where you start, I'm just going to draw a line from here to here. Now what this is a sketch line, which can then turn into areas when they get completed. So if you had like 4 sides, you would have a square that you could be called an area, and that area could be raised up as a 3-dimensional object. That's one type of line. The other type of line is called a construction line, and those are just guides, so they're not going to really affect your work as much, which I really like. So what I like to do is just, you can right click and say normal construction right on the object, or you can see right here it just says X. So I'm just going to click on this first, but in the future I'm just going to hit the X key to transform those lines. I'm going to do the same thing again right here. So I'm going to go down to my line tool again, and it looks like, I mean, that's just a habit of mine to put the crossing right on the red as well as the blue axis, so the X and the Z. If you didn't do that, you might want to switch this to your grid settings to being more adaptive, so that you could zoom in and you're going to have a few more things to snap to. To make sure that everything is working right, you really want to make sure that snap to grid is highlighted, so that it makes it easier to make straight lines. Okay, snapping just means kind of sticking to things. So I'll just cancel that for the moment. So let's just go to line, and I'm just going to draw another one right through the crossing. It does not matter at all how we do this. We just want to make sure that this is a horizontal line and that the other one is vertical. So what you can see is, the reason I know that this is horizontal is there's a little icon right here, and that is what's called a constraint. Okay, so that constraint says, you can see they look like this. This is sort of like your key up here at the top. So this one is saying that this is a horizontal and that this is a vertical. There's also a relationship between these two. If, for instance, they were not already vertical and horizontal, then they might actually give you a little symbol that looks like this, which would mean that they're perpendicular. But since they're horizontal and vertical, we already know that they're perpendicular, so we're okay there. Okay, so we've got our guidelines set up. The next thing that we really want to try out is, we want to see what is we're going to start everything in the Gothic Cathedral based on the crossing square. So let's create our dimensions for the crossing square first. And we want to make sure that they stay mirrored on both sides. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a 2-point rectangle, which is right up here, and I'm going to go from the center right here, and I'm going to go out and say, all right, I have a feeling that this is, oh, this doesn't look too bad. I could say perfect square. We're going to say 5.25. And that's on the first dimension, on the vertical, and I'm going to hit tab, and that's going to switch me over to the other one, and I'm going to say 5.25. Okay, so now we know we have a perfect square right here, and there's a number of things that we can do to make sure that this gets repeated. I'm going to do it sort of the easy way, which is I'm going to double click on the entire edge, and I'm going to use the mirror tool, and that opens up the mirror over here. And I'm just going to select a mirror line, so I'm going to say all 4 of these sides get mirrored from here, and I'll hit OK. Alright, pretty easy. I can do that again like this, and then say mirror, and now I want to mirror on the vertical, and I'll hit OK. Okay, so that's pretty easy, not too bad. Okay, the next step in the process is to create the size of the aisles. And what's really nice about Amiens is it has a nice bit of geometry that's being done here. Some of you may be familiar with these 5/3 rectangles known as the golden section, and that is how we're going to find the width of this first aisle. Okay, so what we do with this is we know that this perfect square in the crossing is bisected, and what I'm going to do is use this thing called the center point arc. If you're missing that up in the ribbon, you can go to arcs, and here's a few of them right here. I'm going to click on center point arc, and from the middle, the way that this works is if you bisect the square and use this as the center of the compass mark, so first the center, then you go to the diagonal, and so you have your width, and now you just roll this down until it's flat, and that's going to be your perfect triangle. So one of the things I like to do here is I then use a 2-point rectangle very quickly to create this right here. Okay, so that is now my aisle. Pretty cool. What we've got here is a golden section. This is also the same dimension as the larger square, so you could then cut this into a perfect square right here and keep further and further, and you get the Fibonacci sequence, which we might be familiar with. So that's that. And there's a few more dimensions that we want to look at. We want to be able to find, okay, how large is the entire nave? How do we create this next set of circles, right, or squares, I'm sorry, around here? And the answer to that is actually pretty simple. So the easy way to do this is to use the dimension that we already have right here and create a perfect square up here that we can use as further patterns if we want to maybe mirror that. Okay, so let's just do that really quickly. I'm going to click on my 2-point rectangle, and I'm going to start from here. And one of the things I want to do is I'm going to click once, and this is a very useful thing about that I absolutely love about Fusion, is that it gives you guides if you are trying to say, okay, well, I want this to be this far, and I want the height to be the same as this length. Then I'm going to run my mouse over to the corner and then start moving up, and you see that green dotted line, right? So you can see the green dotted line is sort of snapping as I'm still on it. So this says 6.489. Now that's not a great measurement, but we can still use that. So if I want to make this a perfect circle, I'll just start typing 6.489. Okay, pretty easy. And then again, my simple way of doing this, there's a lot of ways to do this, is to just keep mirroring. So I'm going to mirror that square from here, hit OK. Now I can double click on both squares. I'm going to hold down Shift and double click both of these and maybe mirror again. And I'm going to mirror off of this line. Okay, so I'm beginning to get the shape that I need. I can finish these off. You can see if they're blue, that means that they're complete areas. So I'm going to complete that here. It's actually saving right now, so it's just going to take a second. Here we go. I'm going to do the same here. And this is common. You can sometimes get the computer can be thinking, if there's like a lot of things to think about, like a lot of constraints, potentially it can slow things down just a little bit, but it should be okay. All right, so we're getting there. Right now we have a perfect square in the middle with golden rectangles everywhere. We have a golden rectangle here, 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 okay? So what we want to do next is figure out how large the transept arms are going to be. And that's actually quite easy. We're going to use some really simple dynamic geometry. We're going to click on the center point arc again. So this is very similar to a tool you would use. Imagine this just being a pole in the ground with a rope attached to it. And from the center point, so from this corner, to the center point of the entire square that we've drawn with one kind of aisle around it. We can move this all the way out and finish the size of the transept arms. Okay, so we've got, in very much in theory, I would say, less than what we're getting from this this plan drawing. We have roughly our width for our transept. Now, you can say that this doesn't really match all that well, but it's really about the precision of the drawing itself in comparison to the actual math that would have been used to create it. So it's nothing really to worry about too much. I mean, you really are going to have an opportunity in this assignment. You don't have to trace Amiens, and I would actually prefer that you do not. So you're going to be able to create your own geometry and your own rules of how the different spaces are created by at least thinking a little bit about diagonals and golden sections and things like that. Okay, so let's just let that pass for the moment. One of the other things that we can do is we can figure out how long the entire nave should be by looking at the diagonal of this entire square. Okay, so we're going to say from here, okay, this is our length right there. I've got the wrong, that's useful. Okay, so I'm going to hit escape really quick. I accidentally selected the wrong arc. I want the one that's the center point arc, so that can be confusing. Hold on just a moment. Okay, so here we are, 1, 2, and as we swing this down, we're going to get the length of the nave. Okay, so it's pretty easy to do. I don't really want all of these compass marks, so I'm going to select them and hit X, just to make things a little cleaner. And just to remind myself what I was doing here, I'm going to finish that off. Okay, so that's the length of the nave. Okay, so we've got our nave length, we have our transept length, which I just made blue here with this little quick line. The next thing that we want to do is let's figure out what is going to be the height of this choir here, or not the height, I should say the width of the choir. And again, just as we've done before, this is going to be a center point arc, and that's going to be pretty simple. That's going to go from this corner to the center, and then swing out quite elegantly, I think. Okay, so we're going to hit X on that. So that gives us our size. And I can just use 2-point rectangle here, so I have something to kind of guide me a little bit. And if I wanted to, I could then just double click really quick. And let's mirror that off of this line. And I'll hit OK. Okay, so we're definitely getting somewhere now. So this next part, you'll see that we have a double aisle in the choir, but we have a single aisle in the nave. So what we're really looking at here too is this does not appear as though these two are even, right? So this second aisle in the transept, this is smaller than this. It's not square either. However, what we've done with our geometry here is we've acted as though these were going to be evenly split. And what I believe is happening here is that we're looking at a situation where the thickness of the wall, the outside of the wall, is taken into account with this geometry, and what they're doing is they're moving it in so that we can still use the center point of this line to give us our next vertical. So let's try that. So I'm going to run over to the top, just move it over, and you can see it just sort of locks, and you can see right here in the corner you'll see that there will be a perpendicular sign if I'm doing it right. Okay, that's pretty easy, not too bad. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do is we need to figure out how we're going to do the hemicycle. Okay, so this area here, and we need this point. Okay, so where does that come from? And the answer is we want the diagonal of the choir, okay? But we really want it to reflect based on this crossing square. So let's create a couple more. They're not really guides, but we really still need them as though they were guides. We're going to make just normal lines here, just to continue this, so we have points that we can stick to, right? Where these intersections are, we're going to have points that we can snap to. So what we want to do, again, is grab our center point arc, and we want the diagonal of the entire choir. Okay, so for instance, coming from this crossing pier, which, as you can see, is much larger, all the way to the end of the choir. If we roll up to the center, we can see, if I zoom in a bit, we're really, really close. Okay, so that's where you find the center of the hemicycle. That's a very useful compass mark to have, because all of these radiating chapels are going to come right off of that. So we can very quickly, we can create a center diameter circle. Okay, so you start with the center. And what I can do is just use these as guides, and I'm going to just kind of roll this up. What I want to do, actually, before I do that, I'll hit escape first. Let's just create a nice line that is going to come up to the top here. That'll make it a little bit cleaner, and I have 2 points that I can snap to. So I'm going to hit center point, circle, and then 1 and 2, and that one is done. Okay. And we're going to want to do the same thing on the other side. So let's do one other short line here. And we can do one more outer circle. And I think, interestingly, I have no idea whether or not this is intentional or not, or if it's merely a coincidence. And that's, that's fine. We are, to some extent, we are assuming a lot of geometry here. We don't have evidence where people explain exactly what their geometry was. We do have some examples of compass marks that remain in buildings and in drawings. So we have a very good feeling that this is how things were going to be done. But for something like this, where is this a coincidence that the buttresses, the exterior buttresses actually make it the same width and they sort of follow the same circle? I would say it's possible, it's probable even, but we don't really know for sure. But I think that's a useful guide nonetheless, so I'm just going to hit X on that. Good. Okay, so we're doing pretty well, but we have some complicated things happening here. What we would like to do is be able to understand how these radiating chapels come together, and that's not a simple thing. Now, the solution that I'm going to come up with here is maybe not the simplest, but it will show you a very useful tool. So let's follow through on this. I'm going to draw a really simple horizontal line, okay, from our center point out to the edge. We're just saving for a moment here. Okay, so we've got our line drawn. I'm going to select that, and there's a very useful tool for us in Gothic cathedral design, which is the circular pattern. So I'm going to select that line, click on circular pattern, and now I'm going to select the center point. Okay, so we have one object selected, which is that blue line already, and our center point is going to be here. Okay, and now you can see it's starting to project that and copy that line around that central point. I'm going to jump this up. The real number I'm looking for is 12. Okay, so 12 apostles. But you'll see really quickly, 12 doesn't quite get us where we want to be. What we want to be is halfway in between all of these things, right? It gets us close, but it's not quite what we want. So I'm going to double this and go to 24. And now you can see we're getting closer to what we want, but we also don't need to keep all of these lines that we're drawing. So let's delete these ones in the middle for starters, And we can just check these boxes, okay, and then I can just get rid of all these things on the bottom. And that's really all we needed. Okay, so I'm going to hit enter here. Ah, looks like I got one extra, but that's okay. I'll just delete that one. And it's giving me a warning saying that I've deleted something that was related to a pattern, but that's okay. I'm going to make this just a guideline for now. Okay, so we're getting a little closer to where we want to be. So what we have is a situation where before we can move forward and find these center points here, okay, they're going to be the center of each of these circular, or really probably octagonal objects here. We need to figure out, we actually need to go backwards a little bit, because what we are seeing is that there's a relationship between this, the flat top of the choir, and this, which, if you remember, we got this from the crossing down here. What we really want to do is see, can we see a similar relationship for these objects for a different circle? Essentially, what I'm seeing is that we have a similar relationship here to here as we do here, here, and here. Okay, to this circle. Okay, so I believe that these are going to be concentric circles, but in order to do that, I need to find, okay, where's this bay supposed to fit? And what I think I think useful way to do this would be if we look at another dimension, which we've done before. We could say, okay, let's make the top of this aisle, and at the crossing, the center point. And if we rotate down until we hit this point, what we're going to see, even when I hit X here, is that right where this crosses is really close to where that bay ends. So we actually have now an intersection point that we can use to just draw a quick line across here. Okay, we haven't mirrored everything yet, but that's okay. Okay, now that's a pretty useful line for us to have. What we can then do is, if we take this and draw, what we're really looking for is this one right here. What we're looking for is, how do we find this particular space? And we're getting a little snapping right there, which is okay, but we don't really know what that's relating to. Is that snapping is maybe something to do with the original line that we drew, and we don't really care too much about that. It's really just a guide. But what we can do instead is cut this object in half. Okay, so if we had a square, a rectangle, that went from here to here, okay, we now have a point that would be the midpoint of this segment, right? So I've drawn that on top, which means that when this turns into a triangle, I've now got the midpoint. So these two will be exactly the same. So I'll draw this one out and make sure that that stays parallel. Okay, so now we have these bays being uniform in the choir. We've got some useful geometric relationships, and the one that I'm sort of playing as I go a little bit here, admittedly. But what I think we can try out is, that's not a bad guess. Okay, so pulling this all the way out to the end of that bay gives me a pretty useful series of points here. Okay, so we just wait a second here. I think I have a lot of stuff running. I think it's hard on the memory on the computer. Not to worry though, if I really want to, I'm going to hit save and say my version description is working on the choir. Well, the choir down here, we're really looking at the hemicycle at the moment. That's okay. Okay, so let's use what we have now. We can extend these lines out. Let's do that quick. You can see how these little symbols look parallel. Okay, I'm gonna kind of pull this out as a guide. And I'll just hit X on that. Just something gives me a little bit of space because I want to pull these out a little bit, so I have something to sort of stick to, I guess. I'll do another quick pattern from there. Doesn't really matter which of these you choose. I could have chosen really any of them. I'm going to select that same center point, and I'm going to, looks like I'm going to have at least 12 here. Okay, so now we have 12, again, 12 apostles, etc. I'm going to close this off. There is certainly a reason why the numbers 7 and 12 are used in here. 7 being a way of dividing it so that we have a central Lady Chapel in the center, right? If it were 12, it would be even and it would be shifted, but this is one way to sort of show that you're considering the apostles. And so I think they're useful cosmic numbers in that sense. Not cosmic, but you see my point. Okay, so we'll take that. That's helpful. And I think from here, what I'd like to do is just draw my circles. Okay, so I've got areas right here that I really want to use as the midpoint. So why don't I just quickly, let's do another tool just to show you all another one. Let's try the circumscribed polygon. Okay, so we're gonna go up here, and I'm just gonna go straight up, and let's go up to here, and mark that for 12. Okay, so we want, that'll give us kind of what we're looking for, I think. Okay, so that's another tool that you can use, so you can see the circumscribed polygon is here, the inscribed polygon is here, and it sort of demonstrates that you meet at a point and the object is inside the circle here, and you meet at the middle of a side with the circumscribed, and the circle is in the center. So that's how you know those two. So let me just quickly turn these into, double click, just turn them into guidelines for now. Okay, so now I've got something. Okay, so let's do this. Let's use our last tool, I think, for the day. We're going to do a 2-point circle, and we're going to create one quick chapel. And since that's going to be duplicated, let's go ahead and select it. And we can do a quick pattern. Again, everything coming off of that same point. So I'm going to bump this up to 12, and I'm going to eliminate the ones I don't want. Okay. There we go. And I'll just hit OK there. All right, so we've gotten pretty far. What I'd like you all to do for homework is think a little bit about, you can begin with this if you'd like, or you can really design your own. I don't mind. What I would like you all to do for this assignment is really just think a little bit about the geometry and be able to explain how you came to the decisions that you came to, right? So if things are going to start anywhere for your projects, they should start with this crossing square, and you can do some basic fractions. You can use the golden section. You can begin expanding. Maybe you have larger transept arms where everything is going to be swinging from a different pivot point across the entire crossing square, right? There are lots of ways to do this, and there's really, I'm not going to, in this assignment, not going to say that there's a wrong way to do it, but I'd like you all to be creative and just design the very basics of your plan. And you can complete, if you can, please complete every bay so that there's at least a square for each one. I think that's going to be it for now. This is a little bit longer of a tutorial than I intended, so we're going to leave it at that. If you have questions, there's always the what to say, Houdini, the Fusion 360 channel in Teams. So please do have a look at that. All right, thanks a lot, guys.